OECD Secretary-General report to G20 finance ministers and central bank governors on the work of the Inclusive Forum on Carbon Mitigation Approaches. Brazil, February 2024. OECD Secretary-General report to G20 finance ministers and central bank governors on the work of the Inclusive Forum on Carbon Mitigation Approaches. Brazil, February 2024. 2. This document and any map included herein are without prejudice to the status of or sovereignty over any territory, to the delimitation of international frontiers and boundaries, and to the name of any territory, city or area. This work is published under the responsibility of the Secretary-General of the OECD. The opinions expressed and arguments employed herein do not necessarily reflect the official views of OECD member countries. Please cite this publication as OECD 2024 OECD Secretary-General Report to G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors on the work of the Inclusive Forum on Carbon Mitigation Approaches, Brazil, February 2024, OECD, Paris. The Inclusive Forum on Carbon Mitigation Approaches (IFCMA) is the OECD's flagship initiative designed to help optimize the global impact of emissions reduction efforts around the world through better data and information sharing, evidence-based mutual learning and better mutual understanding, and inclusive multilateral dialogue. By taking stock of different carbon mitigation approaches, mapping policies to the emissions they cover, and estimating their impacts in terms of emissions reductions, the IFCMA is enhancing understanding of the impact of the full spectrum of carbon mitigation approaches deployed around the world and their combined global impact. The IFCMA is also identifying and addressing challenges related to the calculation of sector and product-level carbon intensity metrics, relevant to the design and evaluation of mitigation policies, and to steer firms' and consumers' decisions towards lower emission products. This work supports better international coordination to avoid the proliferation of different standards, help minimize compliance costs for business, and avoid disruptions to trade. There are currently 58 IFCMA members, including 14 G20 members. The IFCMA allows its members to support and enhance reporting under the UNFCCC by producing comprehensive, systematic and granular country-specific data that can increase availability of policy information, help parties fill existing data gaps in reporting under the Enhanced Transparency Framework, including on expected emission impacts of policies, and provide insights for comparability of information. Inform policy debates, and strengthen mitigation efforts and ambitions, by providing a centralized reference of global mitigation strategies and a platform for exchange of expertise and experiences on a broad range of climate topics. Track domestic and collective progress through the IFCMA's estimates on the effects of policies and policy packages on emissions. Raise and discuss key climate issues in a safe space that brings together developing, emerging, and developed economies to work towards better coordinated and more effective mitigation outcomes. Engage in international discussions on the computation of sector and product-level carbon intensity metrics and their use in policy instruments. Support domestic capacity building through peer exchange among experts from a wide range of countries and international organizations. IFCMA at OECD.org. Copyright OECD 2024. 3. Table of Contents. 1. Introduction. Overview of work conducted in the IFCMA's first year. 2. Membership and governance. 3. Developments with the IFCMA's technical work. Taking stock of mitigation approaches and estimating their effects on greenhouse gas emissions, identifying and addressing the challenges related to the calculation of sector and product-level carbon intensity metrics. 4. Inclusive multilateral dialogue and peer exchange. 5. Next steps. 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. 101113. Copyright OECD 2024. Introduction. I am pleased to report on developments with the Inclusive Forum on Carbon Mitigation Approaches (IFCMA) since my last report to you in October 2023, and to reflect on the IFCMA's achievements 1 year on from its launch in February 2023. Over the past year, the IFCMA has developed into a genuinely inclusive and interdisciplinary forum, bringing together government experts in climate, tax, and economic policy from a broad range of developing, emerging and developed economies with an equal say at the table. There are now 58 IFCMA members, of which 14 are G20 members including Argentina and South Africa. 5 G20 invitees are also members, including Nigeria and Singapore. Barbados and Paraguay are the most recent countries to join. Many more countries, including additional G20 members, continue to actively participate as invitees to help advance the IFCMA's work to take stock of mitigation approaches, estimate their effects on greenhouse gas emissions, and identify and address challenges related to the calculation of sector and product-level carbon intensity metrics. I believe that the consistent and comparable information being generated by the IFCMA has great potential to contribute to more coherent and better coordinated approaches to global mitigation efforts, including in the G20. The IFCMA's work can continue to support discussions ongoing in several G20 working groups, including in the finance track. It is directly relevant to objectives of the recently established Task Force on Global Mobilization Against Climate Change, including strengthening national transition plans, developing win-win partnerships that avoid negative impacts on developing countries, and facilitating exchange on a broad range of mitigation-related topics. I invite G20 finance ministers and central bank governors to support G20 members taking an active role in the IFCMA as formal members. This report provides further detail on the IFCMA's work, membership, governance, and forthcoming deliverables to accompany that invitation. Key milestones in IFCMA's first year. Membership has expanded to 58 IFCMA members, encompassing a wide range of developing, emerging, and developed economies. Members adopted the IFCMA's terms of reference and governance arrangements at the launch event in February 2023, which brought together more than 600 delegates from over 100 countries and 9 international organizations. Delegates designated 12 steering group members in June 2023, responsible for setting IFCMA meeting agenda. Delegates met in June 2023 for the first in-depth technical discussions and to establish a work plan for the IFCMA's initial years. Senior government officials explored strategies to support climate-related investments in an IFCMA-focused session at the October 2023 OECD Forum on Green Finance and Investment. Pilot studies with Chile and Switzerland were launched in November 2023 to help refine methodologies for the IFCMA's technical work. Delegates met in November 2023 to participate in the first inclusive multilateral dialogue, provide direction on the scope of the IFCMA's carbon intensity work, and advance technical work on the stocktake and modeling methodologies. The IFCMA and UNFCCC secretariats jointly organized a high-level event at COP28 in Dubai in December 2023 to explore how the IFCMA can best support the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement. The first IFCMA paper, Towards More Accurate, Timely, and Granular Product-Level Carbon Intensity Metrics, was released in February 2024.4. Copyright OECD 2024. 5. Overview of work conducted in the IFCMA's first year. Delegates met on the 9th to the 10th of February 19 the 20th of June, and the 14th to the 15th of November 2023 to advance the IFCMA's work and have made considerable progress in the following areas. Taking stock of mitigation approaches and estimating their effects on greenhouse gas emissions. To enhance policymakers' understanding of the wide range of mitigation approaches and their impact on emissions, and support UNFCCC processes, the IFCMA is developing a database of mitigation-relevant policy instruments and estimating their effects on greenhouse gas emissions through innovative modeling approaches that link country-specific sectoral models with economy-wide models. The IFCMA is undertaking several pilot studies to gain practical experience and draw lessons on how to approach the stocktake and effectiveness estimates in ways that can be scaled up to a broader set of IFCMA members. 2 pilot studies were launched with Chile and Switzerland in the final quarter of 2023. 2 to 4 additional pilots will be launched by the end of the first quarter of 2024. Delegates are simultaneously advancing work on specific methodological issues, including developing the data structure for the database, to ensure it strikes a balance between granularity and scalability, and is aligned with UNFCCC reporting processes. Developing a mapping methodology, to identify the share of emissions individual policy instruments cover. Advancing scenario designs for the IFCMA's modeling work to estimate impacts on emissions and exploring ways to link sector-level and economy-wide models. Identifying and addressing challenges related to the computation of carbon intensity metrics. Understanding the complexities involved in calculating carbon intensity metrics for products is becoming increasingly important as countries adopt diverse mitigation policies based on these metrics. The IFCMA is analyzing the main methodologies to compute carbon intensity metrics and is identifying and proposing potential solutions to the technical and policy challenges faced when calculating carbon intensity metrics across an increasing number of products and sectors. IFCMA paper Towards More Accurate, Timely, and Granular Product-Level Carbon Intensity Metrics, publicly released in February 2024, sets out preliminary insights on calculation methodologies and related challenges, such as those in collecting and verifying data across supply chains, and data variability. It highlights the risks posed by the proliferation of different methodologies for computing carbon intensity metrics, e.g., potential increased compliance costs for businesses, especially for small and medium enterprises and those in developing countries, risk of fragmentation of global value chains. The paper will serve as the basis for a more extensive report to be discussed by the IFCMA and subsequently released by mid-2024, which will propose potential solutions and outline areas of possible future work. Delegates have expressed interest in a role for the IFCMA in comparing different carbon intensity methodologies used around the world, reviewing data availability and performing empirical analyses, and supporting greater interoperability and convergence of methodologies. As a platform for peer exchange and mutual learning, the IFCMA has also held the first sessions of its inclusive multilateral dialogue in November 2023 with active participation of delegates from G20 members. Member-driven, this dialogue enables countries to share their experiences and discuss a copyright OECD 2024 wide range of climate issues in a non-negotiation setting. Discussions focused on the development and implementation of mitigation strategies and ways to channel finance to optimize mitigation outcomes. To ensure that the IFCMA's technical outputs and dialogues effectively build on and contribute to broader international efforts on climate change, close partnerships have been established with key international organizations, including the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change (UNFCCC) Secretariat, World Trade Organization (WTO), World Bank Group (WBG), and International Monetary Fund (IMF). The IFCMA and UNFCCC jointly organized a high-level event at COP28 in Dubai to further explore the links between the IFCMA and the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement, and how best to exploit synergies. Building on strong collaboration to date, the event confirmed the strong potential for the IFCMA to support both UNFCCC processes, such as country reporting under the Enhanced Transparency Framework, Global Stocktake and Mitigation Work Program, and country progress towards international climate goals. The UNFCCC, WTO, WBG, and IMF are playing an active role in the IFCMA by providing technical feedback, presenting relevant work, and exploring ways to leverage synergies while avoiding duplication of effort. Looking ahead, 2024 will be an important year for the IFCMA with the delivery of the first formal reports across the IFCMA's work areas and results of the first set of pilot studies. Delegates will next meet in plenary session on the 22nd to the 23rd of May 2024 to advance the IFCMA's work and hold further sessions of the inclusive multilateral dialogue to support further peer exchange on key issues important to the IFCMA membership. It will soon initiate informal focus group discussions to help advance IFCMA work between plenary meetings. Membership and governance. Insights and perspectives from a broad range of countries shape the IFCMA's work to ensure it is globally relevant and reflects a wide range of different domestic contexts. The IFCMA seeks to be as inclusive as possible. The current membership of 58 IFCMA members comprises developing, emerging and developed economies and goes well beyond OECD membership. It includes 14 G20 members including Argentina and South Africa, and 5 G20 invitees, including Nigeria and Singapore. Productive discussions are ongoing with many more countries, including other G20 countries currently participating as invitees. Several countries continue to advance cross-ministerial approval processes to formally join, and we hope to welcome them as IFCMA members in the coming months. All IFCMA members participate on an equal footing, meaning that each member has an equal say in decision-making processes. Decisions in the IFCMA are taken on a consensus basis. 1. Argentina 2, Australia 3, Austria 4, Barbados 5, Belgium 6, Bulgaria 7, Cameroon 8, Canada 9, Chile 10, Croatia 11, Czech Republic 12, Colombia 13, Costa Rica 14, Denmark 15, Estonia 16, European Union 17, Finland 18, France 19, Germany 20, Greece 21, Hungary 22, Iceland 23, Ireland 24, Israel, IFCMA members as of the 10th of February 2024. 25, Italy 26, Jamaica 27, Japan 28, Kazakhstan 29, Latvia 30, Lithuania 31, Luxembourg 32, Malta 33, Mauritius 34, Mexico 35, Monaco 36, Netherlands 37, New Zealand 38, Nigeria 39, Norway 40, Paraguay 41, Peru 42, Philippines 43, Poland 44, Portugal 45, Romania 46, Singapore 47, Slovakia 48, Slovenia 49, South Africa 50, South Korea 51, Spain 52, Sweden 53, Switzerland 54, Turkey 55, United Kingdom 56, United States 57, Uruguay 58, Zambia 6. Copyright OECD 2024. 7. Developments with the IFCMA's technical work. Taking stock of mitigation approaches and estimating their effects on greenhouse gas emissions. The IFCMA's work to compile a database on mitigation-relevant policies, identify the share of emissions these policies cover, policy mapping, and estimate their impacts on emissions, is enhancing policymakers' understanding of the wide range of mitigation approaches. Comprehensive, systematic and granular country-specific data produced under IFCMA can also help countries fill existing data gaps in their reporting under the Paris Agreement's enhanced transparency framework, including on expected emission impacts of policies and policy interactions, and provide insights for comparability of information across countries. Database on mitigation and mitigation-relevant policy instruments used in IFCMA, member countries. The IFCMA is collecting granular, country-verified data on policies and a set of key characteristics through an internationally harmonized and standardized typology. For those policy instruments for which mapping is feasible, the database will include information on their emission coverage. Estimates of the impact of mitigation and mitigation-relevant policies or policy packages on emissions. The IFCMA is developing new methodological approaches linking country-specific sectoral and economy-wide models to provide robust estimates on the effects of policies and policy packages on emissions. The IFCMA's work is being conducted in a two-phase process. Phase 1 is dedicated to developing and refining the methodologies for the stocktake, mapping and modeling work through 4 to 6 pilot studies, ongoing in 2024 and 2025. As part of this phase, the IFCMA is also developing a first version of the stocktake and mapping database. Phase 2 is dedicated to scaling up the work to a broader set of IFCMA members in a systematic way, including by regularly updating the stocktake and mapping database. Phase 1 exploratory work and country pilot studies to help develop methodologies. Phase 2. Applying methodologies to broader IFCMA members and continuing to refine methodologies. Status of the pilot studies. The pilot studies are serving as a testing ground for various methodological approaches, and to help the IFCMA identify and address potential challenges, as well as good practices. Explore ways to scale methodologies to a broader set of IFCMA members, taking into account potential data and resource limitations that some countries may face, and converge towards a set of methodological options that is relevant for a wide set of countries while taking into account country-specific economic and emission profiles and mitigation policy approaches. Copyright OECD 2024. 2 country pilot studies, with Chile and Switzerland, were launched in the fourth quarter of 2023. These are focusing on different sectors and employing different working methods to derive as much insight as possible on ways to conduct the work in the most efficient manner. For example, to conduct the modeling work to estimate the impact of policies on emissions, the Secretariat is working with government modelers in the case of Chile, and third-party modelers in the case of Switzerland. Pilot with Chile, pilot with Switzerland. Focuses on power, land transport, copper mining and industry sectors. Covers key Chilean mitigation policies like a green tax, the phase-out of coal-fired generation, and energy efficiency legislation. Information exchange and data processing has already begun, with input from multiple Chilean ministries. Focuses on transport, buildings and industry. Considers measures like fuel excise taxes, EV subsidies, energy labels for new passenger cars, and policies set at subnational level, such as the Flagship Buildings Program as well as the CO2 levy, and will inform approaches to other countries with a federal structure of government. Stocktake of Swiss mitigation relevant policies as well advanced and modeling work has already begun. Point 8. Discussions are underway to initiate an additional 2 pilots by the end of the first quarter of 2024, with an addition 1 to 2 pilots to be initiated subsequently. These pilots are being designated in consultation with the steering group and IFCMA members based on criteria aimed at ensuring the diversity of the IFCMA's membership is reflected. Regional diversity, sectoral and policy diversity, diversity of the level of economic development to support approaches to the development of the reference scenario and adapt to different policy settings. Diversity of the availability of country data and modeling capacity, potential to inform development and scale up of methodological approaches, in light of both previously selected pilot studies and country-specific characteristics, and at least one federal country since these could present additional data challenges. To complement the country profiles of Chile and Switzerland, In the selection of additional pilots, the IFCMA is focusing in particular on selecting countries from Africa, Asia, North America, or Oceania to further support regional diversity, low or middle-income countries to support diversity in economic development, and countries with less developed data availability and modeling capacity to help inform working methods in cases where such limitations occur. Based on feedback from delegates, the IFCMA will also give special consideration to covering a small island developing state. Work on methodological options and challenges. IFCMA delegates are advancing work on specific methodological options and challenges involved in the stocktake, mapping, and modeling work while advancing the pilot studies. Discussions have focused on developing the data structure and typology for the stocktake database, including which policy characteristics to focus data collection on, and how to categorize data. The goal is to strike a balance between collecting as much information as possible and ensuring that the work can be scaled up across IFCMA members. Ensuring that the data structure and typology are aligned with Copyright OECD 2024-9. UNFCCC reporting processes is also a key priority, so that IFCMA data can be used by members to support their international reporting obligations if they so wish. To minimize duplication and limit resource requirements, the IFCMA has already started migrating existing OECD data to the IFCMA database. Developing the methodology to identify the share of emissions a policy instrument covers. Key elements of this work consist of reaching a common understanding on relevant definitions, establishing a step-by-step process to conduct this work across both price and non-price-based instruments, and determining the associated emissions data needs. Ways to link sector-level and economy-wide models to provide a better overview of the impact of policies on emissions, including by taking unintended interaction effects into account. A key challenge is how to arrive at the most accurate and granular estimates, while taking into account resource and time constraints. The design of the modeling scenarios, their underlying assumptions, and data sources have also been a focus. A number of technical notes on IFCMA methodologies in the IFCMA database have been developed as part of this work and are currently being prepared for release as IFCMA papers. Point 1. The boxes below provide a concise overview of their content. Stocktaking and greenhouse gas mapping of transport policy instruments. Proposal for a greenhouse gas mapping methodology of climate change mitigation and climate change mitigation relevant policy instruments. Approaches to linking models for assessing the impacts of mitigation actions on greenhouse gas emissions. Presents elements of a practical application of the stocktaking and mapping exercises, based on sample data collected in 2023 on road transport sector policy instruments in the Netherlands and Switzerland. Highlights that defining the scope of climate change mitigation relevant policy instruments requires both guiding principles and expert judgment. Notes that narrowing the scope to subsectors and assets accounting for the bulk of emissions may be appropriate to keep the scope of analysis feasible and facilitate scaling up without significant loss of comprehensiveness. Suggests a methodology for mapping policy instruments to their emission base to determine their emission coverage. Develops several key concepts and definitions to propose a 5-step approach focusing on a policy instrument's administrative design, regulatory base, and associated legal obligations. Highlights that mapping can be complex and may not be possible for all instruments. Presents GHG mapping examples from the Chilean carbon tax and the planned phase-out of coal-fired power generation. Forms the basis for discussions on coupling detailed sectoral models with economy-wide models to develop robust estimates of the effects of policies on emissions. Reviews different options such as one-way, two-way and multilateral linking, and reviews their potential for the IFCMA's work. Proposes a methodological framework for modeling the effects of policies on emissions. These papers will become available on the IFCMA website. Copyright OECD 2024. Ex post empirical evidence on the effects of mitigation policies on emissions. As part of its work to estimate the effects of policies on emissions, the IFCMA is undertaking a systematic and comprehensive review of relevant existing literature. This work will enable a comprehensive assessment of the expected impact of policies on emissions, provide information on the stringency and coverage of policy instruments, evidence on the responsiveness of emissions to policy changes, elasticities, and other relevant information. The goal is to inform the methodologies used in the IFCMA's modeling work and help to address data gaps. The main output of the work will be a database and an accompanying synthesis report, preceded by regular progress updates. The results and synthesis report will be discussed in the IFCMA plenary meeting scheduled for the fourth quarter of 2024. Delegates have also flagged interest in undertaking a systematic review of the effects of mitigation policies on additional relevant outcomes such as carbon leakage, innovation in low-carbon technologies and employment. A review of relevant literature on ex-ante modeling analyzing the effects of policies on emissions and relevant socioeconomic outcomes could also be undertaken. Discussions on the next steps for this work will take place following the delivery of the 2024 database and report. Identifying and addressing the challenges related to the calculation of sector and product-level carbon intensity metrics. The development and use of sector and product-level carbon intensity metrics can play an important role in supporting the transition to net zero, particularly for the industry sector. Sector and product-level carbon intensity metrics can be useful in designing, implementing and evaluating mitigation policies and can provide crucial information to steer firms' and consumers' decisions towards low-carbon products, supporting the development of markets for low-carbon goods. The February 2024 IFCMA paper Towards More Accurate, Timely, and Granular Product-Level Carbon Intensity Metrics provides an initial overview of the main calculation methods and challenges in collecting and verifying data across supply chains and data variability. This paper will form the basis for a broader IFCMA report to be released by mid-2024, which will analyze these issues in more detail. A first draft will be discussed at the May IFCMA plenary meeting. Key messages from IFCMA paper, Towards More Accurate, Timely, and Granular Product-Level Carbon Intensity Metrics. Existing product-level carbon intensity calculations often rely on default values. Enhancing these with new data collection methods can improve accuracy and relevance. When choosing computation methods, trade-offs between accuracy, cost, and applicability across sectors or products are relevant. Combining different methods could reduce costs but may decrease comparability. Carbon intensity metrics are useful for various purposes, such as assisting governments in developing policies to meet ambitious mitigation targets, and helping businesses and consumers choose less carbon-intensive options. However, the need for more timely and granular metrics is growing, especially at the product level, where challenges in methods and data availability limit their development and usefulness for informed decision-making. The diversity of product-level carbon intensity standards across sectors and regions increases firms' reporting costs and may fragment supply chains. This diversity could lead to a greater focus on local sourcing, impacting international trade. Ensuring compatibility among standards is essential to maintain open markets and limit reporting costs. 10. Copyright OECD 2024. 11. IFCMA delegates have underlined the potential role for the IFCMA to address risk of increased compliance costs for businesses and fragmentation of global value chains arising from the proliferation of different methodologies for computing carbon intensity metrics. The IFCMA could play a role in mitigating these risks by supporting the move to interoperable and harmonized calculation methodologies. Delegates have suggested various avenues for potential future work, including comparing different carbon intensity methodologies used around the world, reviewing data availability and performing empirical analyses, reviewing policy levers that can promote the calculation and sharing of carbon intensity metrics, developing principles and guidelines that governments can consider as they design carbon intensity-based policies to help ensure international comparability, and identifying scalable and reliable methodologies as a common basis for further convergence of carbon intensity methodologies. The 2024 report will further outline these areas of potential work. Delegates will be invited to discuss and shape the next steps for the carbon intensity work over the course of this year. Based on the IFCMA's governance arrangements, the decision on the direction to pursue will be taken by IFCMA members on a consensus basis. Inclusive multilateral dialogue and peer exchange. A key objective of the IFCMA is to provide a platform for inclusive multilateral dialogue to help optimize the global impact of mitigation efforts around the world. The inclusive multilateral dialogue enables participants to discuss a wide range of climate change policy issues in a safe space for peer exchange and mutual learning using a member-driven process. Based on a greater understanding of each other's goals and challenges, countries can work towards better coordinated approaches to optimize mitigation outcomes and other policy goals. Topics suggested by membership informed by relevant technical work. Safe space, for peer and mutual learning. Inclusive multilateral dialogue. Format varies, side event, round table. Expert-led, member-driven. Process. To help initiate work under the dialogue and provide context for future sessions, the first inclusive multilateral dialogue sessions held during the November meeting provided an opportunity to exchange on countries' experiences with designing and implementing mitigation policy strategies. The focus of the second session, on how to channel finance to optimize carbon mitigation outcomes, was chosen as a topic. Copyright OECD 2024. Of wide interest among all IFCMA members and invitees. Delegates touched upon various aspects of these topics as highlighted in the boxes below and further described in a separate summary. Both sessions were well received, with IFCMA members and invitees actively engaging in the discussions. Designing and implementing mitigation policy strategies. Principles and strategies for ensuring effective coordination across government ministries and levels to enable coherent climate mitigation efforts. Integrating climate mitigation into broader policy frameworks, including via legislation, to enhance political viability and policy resilience. Ensuring a fair and inclusive transition to secure public acceptance of mitigation policies. Securing business support by promoting long-term policy signals and a balanced approach of carrots and sticks. Undertaking proactive public consultations and impact assessments to facilitate inclusivity and political support for mitigation policies. The role of independent assessment mechanisms to refine mitigation strategies and enforce government compliance. Channeling finance to optimize mitigation outcomes. The need for significant financial resources, which poses challenges for both advanced and developing countries. The role of greener fiscal systems and domestic revenue-raising instruments, such as progressive carbon taxes and green bonds, in supporting mitigation efforts. The use of partnership-based approaches, such as Just Energy Transition Partnerships, JETPs, to mobilize international finance while taking into account social outcomes. The need to establish shared definitions, harmonized typologies, and consistent metrics for green activities to align the financial sector with Paris Agreement objectives and support transparency and accountability. Approaches to policy frameworks and government support to crowd and private capital. The role of national development banks and investment funds in supporting the transition. The next sessions of the Inclusive Multilateral Dialogue will take place during the 22nd to the 23rd of May 2024 meeting of the IFCMA. Building on the first Inclusive Multilateral Dialogue, the steering group is currently discussing the focus and format of these sessions, based on members' input. Topics previously suggested by delegates include experience with policy design of price-based and non-price-based policies, differences in national statistical systems and building capacity to address data gaps, and international spillover effects, among others. These dialogues may take the form of topical roundtable discussions, technical workshops, and/or country or expert-led structured discussions, depending on the needs and interests of IFCMA members. They may be informed by the outputs of the technical work when they become available, to discern best practices, further support evidence-based mutual learning, and inform policy decisions. The IFCMA is providing opportunities for peer exchange in other aspects of its work. For instance, Finland presented their research and innovation initiative Catch the Carbon, Climate Mitigation from Research to Practice in a dedicated briefing session during the 14 to 15 November meeting, discussing practical solutions for carbon sequestration and emission reductions in the land use sector. That meeting also hosted a roundtable discussion on domestic approaches to modeling the impacts of policies on emissions, in which Denmark, Nigeria, the Philippines, and the United States shared experiences. Delegates noted that there is considerable scope to learn from each other in this area, and the Secretariat is exploring ways to further facilitate peer exchange. 12. Copyright OECD 2024. 13. Next steps. Consistent with the IFCMA's governance arrangements, the steering group is currently developing the overall agenda for 2024 based on members' input. It is envisaged that delegates will focus on delivery of the IFCMA's first formal publications and initial results from the pilot studies in its plenary sessions in May and the fourth quarter of this year. The informal focus group discussions being organized on a virtual basis will provide further opportunity for peer exchange and engagement in the technical work. Efforts to broaden the IFCMA's membership will also continue, including through ongoing participation of invitees in IFCMA meetings, as will collaboration with other international organizations and fora to foster mutual knowledge development and avoid duplication of effort. Taking stock of mitigation approaches and estimating their effects on emissions. Forthcoming release of IFCMA papers on taking stock and mapping transport sector policy instruments, a methodology to map policy instruments to their emission base, and ways to link sectoral and economy-wide models. Release of the synthesis report on ex post empirical evidence on the effects of mitigation policies on emissions, to be discussed by the IFCMA in the fourth quarter of 2024 and delivered by the end of the year, followed by discussions on next steps. Consideration of the initial results of the pilot studies of Switzerland and Chile and the launch of additional pilots. Further work on specific elements of IFCMA methodologies, taking into account the lessons learned from the pilot studies. Identifying and addressing challenges related to the calculation of carbon intensity metrics. Release of the Carbon Intensity Report by mid-2024, to be discussed in the IFCMA meeting on the 22nd to the 23rd of May, followed by discussions on next steps. Peer exchange and inclusive multilateral dialogue. Continuation of peer exchange in the inclusive multilateral dialogue and beyond. Copyright OECD 2024. www.oecd.org/climate-change/inclusive-forum-on-carbon-mitigation-approaches. ifcma@oecd.org